Live from Television Hill, this is WJZ Breaking News.
Breaking news, Dante Harris has been found guilty in the death of Officer Amy Caprio. Here is his defense attorney, Warren Brown.
And he is a boy. Oftentimes referred to as a young man, but he is a boy. What the future holds, only God knows that. That morning of May 21st, nearly a year ago, when both of these individuals, Dante Harris and Officer Amy Caprio, got up, I suppose that they both felt like at the end of the day, at the end of their shift, that they would go home and they would retire like days before. But for their coming together that day, Officer Caprio would be alive and this young man would not be spending the rest of his life in prison. So for those who want to rejoice on either side, you know, as I indicated, there are no winners, just losers here. We were just going through the legal process that's required when an act such as this is committed. But nothing this court can do can bring Officer Caprio back. Nothing this court can do can put this boy on good standing the morning of May 21st of 2018 and such that he would not have to have been in a predicament such as this. And so that's pretty much where we stand. I do want to compliment the state's attorney, the police department. They did a great job. The judge gave us a very fair trial. Can't complain about that. Due process. This young man had his due, and then we'll just see what the future holds, which of course none of us has any idea about that.
Will you be filing appeal for a new trial?
Yeah, we'll file a motion for a new trial, and obviously after sentencing there'll be an appeal that's filed as well.
How's Harris feeling? I mean,
well, he's not in good shape. You know, he's not in good shape. This kid he's been in a whirlwind the whole time. So you know, but you know, he'll have to deal with it.
Warren, what did you make of the jury finding him guilty on one of the first-degree burglaries and not the other?
Right. Well, there's a couple things there. One is that I think that's because the phone contact was going on with regard to that Linwood Way address. That's the one they found him guilty of. The one before that, there's no evidence that there was any phone contact. He was just in the vehicle. The other thing is that when they found him guilty of that Linwood Way, which was the first count, not guilty of the second count, there was still some hope that on the third count, which is the mother lode here, the felony murder, that, you know, somehow I've seen crazier things happen with jurors, that they might find him not guilty on that. But so it was kind of, you know, a double punch to the gut. Because even after the first guilty on Linwood Way, there was still some hope that maybe, especially after they found him not guilty on the second count, that maybe on that third count, which was the felony murder, that he would be found not guilty on that. But, you know, obviously that was not the case. And so, you know, and I kind of hope this brings some relief to Officer Caprio's family. Because they've been going through it since day one, and will continue to go through it. So you know, I hope it provides them some relief.
What words? I guess was there any words for correction? Anything you could have said to your client, or what did you say?
I just told him to hold tight, that God has the ultimate say in all of this, that he does have a right of an appeal, and just hold on.
And what issues will you be appealing?
Well, what will happen is those wiser than myself will go over this transcript and they'll decide the issues on appeal. As most people know, my thing is trial. On appeals, there'll be some other lawyers that deal with that, I'm certain.
Warren, do you still think Dante Harris was a kid who got kind of caught up with the background?
Oh, absolutely. Dante Harris, absolutely. I'm not saying that the jury was wrong in their verdict. They could have gone legitimately could have gone either way. And in fact, they did, to the extent that on the first burglary is guilty, second burglary not guilty. He's like a lot of kids. He's like a lot of kids that start off in a mischievous way, and then that gets exacerbated, and they find themselves in this type of predicament. And if there's any benefit to the notoriety that this case has achieved, hopefully there's some young kids out there who see this, that they can start off in something that's not so sinister, like joyriding in a vehicle, and find themselves facing life imprisonment. Thank you.
We just heard from the defense attorney for Dante Harris, who was just recently found guilty on charges for killing Baltimore City police officer Amy Caprio. That was Warren Brown talking there.
So just to recap, he said there are no winners here, just losers. Dante Harris is 17 years old. He reminded us that he is a boy. He will file a motion for a new trial as well as appeals. He says Dante is not in good shape. His head is in a whirlwind, and he called the verdict a double punch to the gut.
Let's get live right now to Devin Bartolata, who's been following this case for us. She is at the courthouse in Towson with more information on this. Devin.
Lynn and Nicole, we just got out of the courtroom just moments ago here, right before this press conference you just watched. So I want to go over what the actual charges were and what he was found guilty and not guilty on. So in all, Dante Harris did face 5 charges. That was 1 count of felony murder, 2 counts of first-degree burglary, a 4th-degree burglary charge, and a charge of theft. Now, the interesting part of this was that to be convicted of felony murder in the state of Maryland, you must also be committing another felony at the time, which meant this jury had to find Dante Harris guilty of at least one of those burglary charges to convict him of felony murder, and that's exactly what we saw happen here. He was found guilty of the theft of the Jeep, guilty of 1 count of first-degree burglary, not guilty of the other count of first-degree burglary, not guilty of 4th-degree burglary, and they did end up finding him guilty of felony murder in the death of Officer Amy Caprio. We saw throughout this trial many different arguments, lots and lots of evidence on both sides of this. Yesterday, in closing arguments that started yesterday morning, we watched prosecutors bring up surveillance video. They brought up photos that they say described Harris of the scene of these burglaries, and they described him as the getaway car in these burglaries that happened yesterday. And on the other side, on the defense side of things, we saw attorneys say, no, he was just sitting in the car listening to music. He was just an innocent kid. They actually called him, quote, a dumb kid in a nice vehicle, just joyriding with some friends, and had no involvement in these burglaries that happened. So definitely a lot for this jury to consider. They had some trouble with this. They had about 7 or 8 questions that they did ask the court yesterday in terms of procedures and clarifying some of the language that was in the definitions of some of these counts. And today we saw that he was found guilty of felony murder, first-degree burglary, and of theft. Lynn.
Devin, talk about the reaction inside the courtroom when that verdict was read.
You know what, Lynn, I want to talk about that in just a moment, but we do have attorney J. Wendell Gordon. He's here, so we're going to spin around and take what he has to say.
These are the pants. The young man was found guilty today. These are his pants. As I said in the beginning, this was a very tragic incident. But as I stand here after the verdict, I know that the jury gave it their most intense consideration. I have no criticism whatsoever about the verdict. I told y'all in the very beginning that we were going to do our best, we were going to fight. And that's what we did. We fought. And because of us fighting, it wasn't a clean slate. He was found not guilty of some of the charges that remained. He started out with 19 charges, and at the end of the day, felony murder is felony murder, and we get it. Our hearts go out to the family. Our hearts go out to Dante Harris and his family. This was an accident. The state proved its case beyond reasonable doubt that it was felony murder. We have to accept it. But nevertheless, the fight continues. I expect that there will be an appeal of this matter. We will file post-trial motions. We're not going to give up on this young man yet. We still got more fight in us. Am I sad? Yes, I'm sad. I'm sad across the board for everyone involved. There are no winners here today. A guilty verdict is not going to bring back Officer Caprio. And it certainly is not going to benefit our client one bit. It's just a tragic situation. It's just tragic. But there's no shame, there's no apology for standing up and representing this young man. We would do it again and again and again in a situation such as this, where the vitriol and the hatred was so pervasive that many thought it would be difficult to even get a fair trial. And I do believe that it's because of the representation of myself and Mr. Brown that Mr. Harris did receive a fair trial. Hats off to everyone involved, including the judge, who was fair from the beginning of this case to the end. I really don't know what else to say. Dante Harris is not doing well. As you can imagine, this is an iron curtain to the last act of his return to the outside community for a while. He's 17 years old today. He just wept. He wept. From the time that the verdict was read until the time that I left him. He's extremely remorseful. Unfortunately, you can't turn back the clock on situations such as this. Today's one day has turned into day one. For some, it's healing. For others, it is being penalized for some wrong that the jury has found. I really don't know what else to say. I really don't.
Mr. Gordon, what do you make of the jury kind of having a split verdict as it relates to the first-degree burglary charges?
Again, they were attentive, and what I make of it is that they considered everything. Look, this case could have gone any way. There was enough evidence, or there was enough of a lack of evidence to find him not guilty. If that was the desire, there was enough evidence to find him guilty, if that's the desire. So it's like you're judging a boxing match, and you know, because the law of attrition, I mean, this case was going back and forth. I mean, there was a lot of attrition in this case, and no one really could call this case when it was over. No one really could say, oh, we hope this, or we're confident about that, but you didn't really know, and there was support for either side. And so that's where I find some pride in what we were able to do for Dante Harris, because it wasn't a railroad, and that was one of our main objectives. No one was going to be railroaded on our watch. He was going to have all the resources, all the expertise that we could provide. And we brought all of that to bear. And all of you all who were in the courtroom, I think you all probably understood that there was no give up in us. That we were going to fight this thing. And we didn't care who hurled epithets at us, who made death threats, who said the most hateful things towards us, and whatever names they called us. Because it's not what you call us. It's what we answer to. We answer to dignity, we answer to justice, and we answer to what's right. And I think we did all of those things in this case. So
You were listening to defense attorney Jane Whittle Gordon. Once again, Dante Harris found guilty in the murder of Officer Amy Caprio.
WJZ will continue to bring you any updates we have. We're going to go now back to The Price is Right.